Are you not entertained? What is happening? This is New Generation Media, New Generation Podcast Network. I'm EJ Stewart, joined by Kendall Stewart. Today we're doing our episode recap of X-Men 97, Episode 9. Tolerance is Extinction Part 2. We are barreling towards the finale. This is part 2 of a 3-part finale that we're seeing. And Kendall, the show continues to raise the stakes. It continues to raise the bar. And this episode did not disappoint. You had some sick costumes. You had some killer moments, character moments. You had some the dissension that I had talked about, and we all talked about a bunch leading up to this moment where you have Charles Xavier coming back. You even have Magneto coming back to the team and trying to recruit. This was an absolute banger of an episode. A lot going on and a lot to talk about.
Boy, I mean, yeah, there's so much in this, and that's what's so great about the show. Because, like you talked about, like you mentioned, DJ, the dissension is something that you mentioned. You were the first one to bring that up, and we all agreed that was an angle that they were probably going to go with. But what's great about this show is that it has these moments where you know what's going to happen, and yet it still is incredible, or it still happens in a way that is better than you would have expected it to happen. It plays out in a way maybe slightly different than what you would expect to happen. So, yeah, like we didn't really pick out of a hat who was going to leave the team, but like if we did, I don't know if I would have said Sunspot. Like like he might not have been my first pick, but like it makes logical sense for what they've set up. So yeah, they tease some stuff that paid off quite a bit in this episode.
And I'll say this. I mean, I know I don't want to labor too much on this because I didn't expect to get this early. Because you mentioned Sunspot, though, right at the top there, him trying to leave with Magneto. X-Men 97 made a mistake. The first mistake maybe of the season, maybe outside of some of the handling of the storm stuff, I thought with this episode, but not necessarily with this actual episode. This actual episode was, again, complete fire. This rollout, though, of the pre-clip that came out before this episode, you can't show that clip, man. You can't show that clip. Now, I don't
Oh, I
know.
got spoiled. Did you get spoiled?
Yeah, well, Marvel dropped the clip. Marvel Studios dropped the
Yeah.
clip,
I didn't
and the
watch the
clip.
clip, but I saw screenshots of all these costumes and stuff. I'm like, damn, man.
Once you see the screenshot later, there's no way to avoid that spoiler once even a screenshot. So sometimes you be scrolling your phone or scrolling whatever,
Yeah,
and a
I
joint
don't know
comes
what that
up,
is. My
and
people.
you're like, oh, I don't know what that was. I'm just gonna keep moving. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you can get away with that. Like you see the Marvel girl suit in glass display and the brown, and shout out to Wolverine. We'll talk a lot about him this episode. I'm wearing the exact costume he got it. You see the iconic brown and yellow Wolverine suit in a glass display. There's no way you can avoid that. Once that happens, it don't even matter what the context is or anything else. That is already a massive spoiler. So I love this show. This show is complete fire. But just one little small thing. I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of praise for this episode. The spoiler clip they put out there, not great. Marvel Studios, they've been great. I think for the other clips, I think have been awesome in terms of like they're clips from the episode, but I never felt like, oh, if I watched this, I got ruined. Most of the time, I didn't watch it. Like I was like a little 50-50. Sometimes I watch, sometimes like I don't want to watch that. I'll just wait for the episode.
You mentioned
This
shout
one,
out Wolverine.
Kendall 4-1 for Wolverine. I wish
What
funny. I
up?
went to get my water. I have my cup. I didn't actually even put any water in this joint.
What up?
Yeah, I know. 4-1 out for
Get to
Wolverine.
that later.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that later in terms of what his fate is. It didn't look good. We'll say that. It did not look good. But man, shout out to this episode again. Shout out to everybody checking us out on YouTube. We're on New Generation Media on our YouTube channel. If you like our content, make sure you go over there, subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button on the video. I know we're recording or we're streaming live super early today. Some of that is a lot to do with I am a Knicks fan. People who follow the channel know what's happening. Knicks have a big game too, so I want to make sure I get this out before NBA. Man, by the way, come on, 8 p.m. Like they could have done it at 7 to 7:30. We could have recorded after the game, or like they put
Western
us in a
Conference
rock,
game.
put us in a rock and a hard place. So this was the best we could do. So I know some of the folks that may be like, "Whoa, you guys recorded without watching." We're on YouTube. You'll see it up there momentarily. For the folks that maybe will be looking for us later in the evening. But this episode, so again, a lot happens. We kind of get with Charles Xavier kind of waking up to the disaster that is what life is like on Earth right now. He can't even go to the floating. He can't even go to the floating yellow wheelchair because that joint got destroyed in the attack. So he's like, man, he's real down bad. So he's got to go with the old school regular wheelchair rolling around. The mansion's destroyed after the attack from the Prime Sentinels, and he has a lot of explaining to do. First, he has a lot of explaining to do with Scott. The Scott Jean dynamic is so damn good in this show. It's so mature. Like Scott and Jean, I think for a lot of people, I mean, unless you're a Scott fan, some Scott fans don't even like Jean, quite frankly. But unless you're a Scott fan or a Jean fan, you're a fan of that relationship. It can get a little like stale. There's been nothing stale about anything involving Scott and Jean in this run they've had, and I loved like Jean being like, all right, like you only got like 5 minutes, so like get your licks in now, and like you run like rail them out, like say what you gotta say. We know Charles effed up, so say what you gotta say, and then we gotta save the world. Like their awareness of the situation. I love so that conversation between Scott and Charles was a good one, and I think a lot of these conversations, a lot of the challenging that Charles had in this episode from so many folks, from Rogue to Cyclops to Magneto, obviously, everyone said the only thing I messed up on. I told y'all they all have smoke for him. I mean, I tweeted, like, I watched this episode at 4 a.m. So I tweeted, man, they talking spicy in this episode. The only thing I messed up on, the only thing that didn't happen, nobody snuffed Charles. And the only reason why he didn't get snuffed, I think, is because he's in a wheelchair. Otherwise, somebody was going to snuff Charles. Because
no Malik Wright from the game.
Yeah, you can't punch a guy in the wheelchair. Everybody who's watched the game knows from the Malik Wright that you can't punch a guy in the wheelchair. And I am like 1,000% convinced that is really the only reason why there wasn't more smoke for Charles in that physical front. But from a verbal standpoint, just a standpoint of just like, dude, like this is what you left us. And what I really enjoyed about this episode, Kendall, from the X-Men standpoint, at least from Scott and some of the other X-Men, is that how they challenged Charles on leaving the X-Men to Magneto. Because it's so funny, we've been watching this show a lot from Magneto's perspective, and even the last episode, yes, he becomes the human EMP, the global EMP, but I still feel like because we've been watching everything from his perspective, and literally that scene ends with him saying, with Val Cooper saying Magneto was right. I think it was, we didn't kind of really get any referendum like, man, like that was the guy that was leading the X-Men, and this is what he just did. Like, this is where the world is. Like, Charles left Earth. He was seriously injured, and he was on his deathbed, but he left the X-Men to Magneto, and this is what happened. Like, whatever we think of Magneto's cause, whether he's right or wrong, he clearly miscalculated. And I like that they really like hammered him on that. They didn't let him get up. They didn't let him up on that at all. He had to really defend himself, and his answers were bad, which is why I think a lot of these people didn't have time for him.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned even like that first scene of Charles where we see him, trying to get out of bed, and like you said, him not having the yellow wheelchair, and it really sort of even the attention to detail of kind of humanizing, a handicapped individual. A lot of times we see Charles, and like you said, you almost forget he's in a wheelchair sometimes.
Yeah,
it's like he's so powerful, he's so in control of himself that like you forget that.
I don't think I've ever seen him have to get in that wheelchair. I don't think I ever had to see him get in that yellow wheelchair. Like, no. Never. Yeah. Like, and that was, I mean, it's brilliant stuff by the team. Like, they wanted to show him at his most vulnerable. And we've seen him get knocked out of the wheelchair. We've seen him, like, for whatever reason, not have his wheelchair. But, like, something about that, like, him being in bed, he can't walk, and he can't even, he's going to, like, this, like, the wheelchair looks very rickety because we're so used to seeing him in the yellow floating wheelchair. And he's getting this, he looks old, it's kind of, like, it's just a whole different vibe, and it speaks to just, like, what I would say, Kendall, and I don't know how I haven't heard anything from the team in terms of what they thought. It felt very much, those scenes of him at the mansion trying to explain himself felt very much like the Emperor has no clothes kind of feeling. Or even like the Wizard is fake from the Wizard of Oz. Like, that's what it felt like. He ain't even got his real wheelchair. Like, he's getting out of bed just like everybody else. all of that like really cemented himself in a lot of these scenes. And again, a lot we see several of the X-Men are fed up with his act, quite frankly.
Right, and that's not to really get into the movies, but that's we saw some moments like that with James McAvoy's Professor X,
Yeah,
where
for
they
sure.
really got deep into that. Whether it be the second movie, Days of Future Past, Dark Phoenix got into some of that as well. Patrick Stewart never really. Patrick Stewart was like the '90s one. It was just like he's
Yeah.
like again he's your perfect he's Coach K. You're perfect professor, perfect coach, perfect teacher. Um, but yeah, no, even that beginning, like I said, just showed the attention to detail. But you're right. I mean, you mentioned Cyclops was going to be one of the first ones that was going to be, against Charles, you know, in terms of, his frustrations with him being gone. Clearly
Right.
that leaked video from Bastion was an issue. Clearly that
Yeah.
it wasn't an issue really last episode, like, but clearly that's something that they were kind of holding in the back of their minds, like where if and when we see this guy, we got issues with this. So, and even Magneto brought it up at one point. So,
Yeah, he called his
yeah, no,
homegirl Bird. And I know,
yeah,
I
yeah,
know, I know the Shi'ar Empire. I know Lalandra. There's bird influences, but like that was not an accident. Like
right,
Demayo and the crew knew what they're doing by saying, "Oh, you and your bird woman." Like,
yeah,
I mean, this episode again, they were talking spicy. I mean, you
right,
had Rogue being like, well, maybe looked at us as people, not students. Like maybe you would have thought differently about like how you operated all of this. Like, and again, like Charles really is in a situation where he doesn't have a lot of answers because again he miscalculated a lot of this. He put this thing out like his reasoning and the reason why he explains. And what do you think about his reasoning explaining why he gave the team Magneto? He, I kind of didn't expect that answer. His answer is essentially, I gave Magneto the team because you, Scott and Jean, like I couldn't have you guys living with the burden of trying to like carry the weight of the squad. Like I wasn't gonna leave you. I wasn't gonna let you be John Shire to my Coach K. I wasn't gonna allow that. So
right,
so I wanted you guys to live a normal life, live a great life, and go off into the sunset. Which is very ironic because that is what Madeline Pryor was saying about this whole situation. That she read it correctly. She's like, "This is our opportunity actually to step out of this." And then what about Scott's answer? Kendall saying like, "There's just no way, given the world that you left and the world that we're in, that you are in denial in, that we could ever really walk away. What's going to happen is we were going to walk away, and a catastrophe was going to happen, and we were going to be right back into this anyway." How do you feel about how that dynamic shook out in terms of Charles's answer and then the response from Scott?
yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think either party was dead wrong. I think I understand Professor X's mentality there. There are a lot of people that have jobs, or different responsibilities that they don't want passed on to, people that they care about. Whether it be their underlings or whatever or what have you, and so it makes sense that, like you said, there are certain certain coaches that may not want their assistant coach to have to deal with the same problems that they have. Maybe they want them to take another job because this job's not the job you want, so to speak. But to use a sports analogy, but when it comes to Cyclops' response, I think that's also natural. But that also comes from sort of the cycle that they live in, man. Like when you're a part of the X-Men, there's just a cycle. Maybe we view it from the outside lens. We just see the cycle because there's a million different X-Men projects that tackle the same issues, but it just feels like there's a vicious cycle of uh, you know chaos and
Yeah,
stuff going wrong. Kind of that chart of 20 days since the last catastrophe when it comes to the X-Men. Um, so yeah, I mean, again, Cyclops lives through it, and this is remember, I mean, this is a show that like is continuing a series that had 4 or 5 seasons. So you've got now this is a seasoned veteran, grizzled Cyclops that's been through a lot of wars that
yeah,
knows this is what we signed up for at this point. Like there is no getting away from it as much as we would like to. Like Um, maybe a rookie Cyclops or a younger version of Cyclops may, you know, may be more willing to be like, yeah, maybe there's more
Right.
out there than just the X Men. But um,
Yeah,
I
I think
think
every,
they've accepted that
I think Cyclops and everyone, not everyone, but a lot of the team, I think they all kind of realized that how naive Xavier is and a lot of his thinking. And again, I think this has caused great damage. But to the team's credit, they're able to kind of quickly shift off of this like laying the Charles because the show also does a good job of kind of like laying out the damage Magneto has done. And when we say Magneto started a war, like that is essentially what we kind of see ensuing. Like thousands have been killed is the word that are used. Hot like kind of things we mentioned, and it was great that now they really like spelled it out because Shamari really and shout out to Shamari. He wasn't able to make it this episode. He'll be back for the finale next week. But Shamari laid it out well, where he's like, look, like hospitals are gonna be out of service, planes are gonna be coming out of there. Like in theory, this would be obviously a massive catastrophe that like maybe they couldn't show in that one scene, but that had to be explained, and they did that very well with this. And I think at one point, Charles is like, "Yo, bro, you've killed like thousands of people," and like and Randy was like, "Are the thousands in Genosha coming back? Like they ain't coming back. So like, what's good?" Again, they
spelled
did
it
a good
out better
job.
than Marvel. Not to put out a Marvel diss track, but they
Okay,
spelled it
Kendall,
out better than than Marvel did
Kendall
with
Lamar.
the blip. Like the
Yeah,
blip,
they did.
we assume that a lot of bad stuff happened because of the blip, and like there are some shows that happened that showed some good stuff, WandaVision and what have you, but a lot of the blip was kind of washed over, and it's like, man, like that was supposed to be a crazy thing, and then we have new projects coming out don't even reference it. Um, so yeah, I mean that was X-Men's version of the blip, and they handled it with a little bit more detail.
So not only is there the immediate where thousands have been killed just purely off of Magneto doing this, there's then the aftermath, which is the pushing back from humans that are now going after mutants who are blaming mutants for everything that's happening, and then there's the imminent thing of like the Earth can't survive in this like in this situation. Like Magneto has destroyed essentially the Earth's magnetic field with this. He's created asteroid M out of the Earth, so it's a night like this is a nightmare on all its fronts. Like this is I tweeted today. This is game 7. Like this is game 7. Bastion is doing his thing. Magneto's doing his thing, and this is all going to end extremely poorly. This is essentially an extinction event that is ensuing, and so the team kind of has to move off of what's going on with Magneto and excuse me, or even Bastion, and even getting after Xavier, and kind of focusing on now 2 goals, which is one, get to Bastion, stop what he's doing, and also stop Magneto. So they split into the gold and blue teams, which is again very iconic to hear that in the X-Men. So you had Jean and Storm leading. I believe they were the gold team. I believe you had Cyclops leading the blue team, and they were the team that was going after Magneto. So it was Cyclops, Xavier. You had Wolverine, of course, in the mix. I don't know if there was anyone else on that squad. Nightcrawler, I think, might have been with them, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that squad, and then you had Gold Team, Cable, Jean, Storm, Morph. Morph turned into
Beast.
Hulk in battle, which was nasty. What you say?
Beast.
And Beast, yes, Beast was putting in work. Yes,
Yeah, I mean
exactly.
The Hulk morph switch. I mean they've been teasing these throughout the season. We
Yep.
all assume that what X-Men characters are you going to turn into this week? Like it's becoming a bit, but I don't think anybody they definitely knew that like dropping that in episode 9 was going to have people
Yeah.
lose their minds, and it worked.
This is
Shout out to
Wolverine.
them. And now makes me wonder what's going to happen in episode 10. Like who's he going to turn into? Wolverine? Like
I
I don't know.
mean, yeah, who else? Who he could be anybody at this point? And there was a little foreshadowing because we had the Hulk was mentioned on the show earlier this season, and this
Yeah.
is the first time the Hulk has officially appeared on the X Men animated series universe, whether it be '97 or the original show. So a super cool moment there. Um, I guess I'll split this. So before we get to the battles, we got to the team and Magneto kind of pulling up on Xavier and pulling up on the squad, and basically, again, this is Xavier being like, stop this madness, bro, and he's like you with your bird woman while everybody was killed, what should happen, like we're off this, like I tried your way, and now because of it, people are dead and mutants are dead, and now we're the hunted again. So he offers the olive branch to the rest of the squad, saying, "Whoever wants to join my mission, come with me." And Rogue has zero hesitation. Rogue's like, "Yep, I'm going." She goes right over with the squad, which obviously was devastating for the team. But Rogue minces no words. And again, when I say people talking spicy, talking spicy. You got, Xavier's like, yo, like, I think Storm was like, yo, you gonna leave this? You gonna leave your family? She's like, I'm not seeing any more mutants die. He's like, I'm not seeing any of y'all die. Like, oh, I'm gonna watch Jean Grey die again. He's like, I'm gonna watch Morph die again. Morph was on the squad for Morph was on the squad for 2 minutes and he died. Like, which was just, crazy bars. I'm like, what? Rogue is she's just cracking jaws everywhere talking about and I think it was, and I think it was fitting, obviously, that she did this because she's the one that has really took the loss the worst, obviously, with Gambit. But I also appreciate that scene because it was prior to the lead up, which was her saying that Professor X isn't seeing them as humans. He isn't, or rather, people, rather. He's not seeing them as people. He's seeing them as students that he's leading into war and leading into dangerous situations. And it's leading to death. And she's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not seeing any more mutants die. So she joins the squad. And Sunspot joined the squad, which I think if there was anything in this episode that was a little random, I felt like I didn't really quite get that a little bit. I guess they tried to make the impetus that his mother, like, just basically handed him to the Prime Sentinels. By the way, we never got a great deal of, like, what happened after that. We just see them running in the streets. And then, Storm and Ford. Shout out to Ford. Love seeing him on the squad and him, like, part of the situation. They save him, which was a cool scene. But, like, it was kind of like, I was like, how did they get decollared? How did they get away? Like, what happened with all that? They kind of skipped that a little bit. But they get saved by Forge and Storm. But Sunspot joins Magneto, and those are the two. I kind of wish there were more.
That was my biggest pet peeve with that sequence and probably this episode is I don't think it makes sense for the Magneto that I know and that we've seen to only have 2 henchmen. Like, there are so many mutants. I know we're only in season 5, or now season 6 or whatever of this show. So it's not like, I know he may have gone through the gambit of Brotherhood of Mutants. He may have alienated enough of those people. He may be dead. I don't know what happened to all of them. But, like, you mean to tell me Magneto couldn't round up a bunch of... It could have been randoms, but, like, there's plenty of X-Men characters you could have brought out and been like, yo, like, I don't know who. I could just throw out random names, Polaris, and, or you could have thrown out, Quicksilver, or you could have threw out Avalanche, bring back some of the OGs. Like, it doesn't matter, but, like, there's no reason why Magneto didn't have any Brotherhood people with him on top of Rogue and now I know they wanted to keep this into a contained X-Men, schism, an X-Men war that we've talked about all season. And we start bringing in, random Magneto acolytes. It muddies that water.
Yeah, and which I will say, and I hear what you're saying. There's some that I agree with, but I think the last fight scene is so awesome. If there are a bunch of randoms that we haven't seen all season in that fight scene, I think it takes away from it, quite frankly. I do. Like, I think the fact that it was, like, to shout out, Drake and Kendrick, it was a 1v20. Like, I think that actually made it more intense. Like, they were part of his team just not that long ago. He was living in the building not that long ago. And it was very clear immediately that, again, this was Game 7. This wasn't, we playing patty cake or, okay, like, we just haven't, we got to stop you, but we're not trying. This is Game 7. Is everything on the line. There's no holding back. Like, so, again, you're right. I think from a story standpoint, yeah, you kind of wonder, oh, man, he only got, it's like, you could leave the streets, but the streets don't leave you. Like, you could always call the killers when you need them. You would think maybe Magneto got some of these guys on speed dial. But I do feel like it did lend itself to a really killer final scene to see like that 1v20, and again to once again show just how powerful Magneto is. That like you had the most powerful telepath in the world, and 3 or 4 very strong X-Men, and it's a battle to the death, literally to the death, pretty much. That scene was awesome. I think you may lose a little bit of
Quickly,
that if you get those other guys. Yep.
I'll quickly give them some. I'll defend them a little bit on Sunspot only because they kind of insinuate that like, look, he has no allegiance to Professor X. He doesn't know this guy,
That's true.
so he's already calling him out early in the episode. Professor X probably,
Yeah.
who's this kid? Like,
Yeah.
and so it makes sense in that standpoint that like when he joined the team, Magneto was running the joint. So like now I'm just gonna and the way things have played out, like maybe Magneto was right this whole time. So
That's fair.
in
Yeah.
that sense, I think that makes sense. It's just unfortunate that he had to skip out on Jubilee. It was like, man,
Right.
that's unfortunate. But otherwise, like he's like, I don't really know any of you people. So he that was like the classic, vintage young mutant decides to join Magneto. He's been
Yeah. Oh yeah.
uh,
This Pyro next too.
yeah, the pyro, yeah. We've seen that a million times.
So we'll get back to the Magneto fight because that's where you got to end this episode, of course, in this discussion. But I want to go to the Gold Team squad going up against Bastion. So Gold Squad goes out. Um, again, this the sisterhood that they've built between Jean and Storm, so touching, so great.
Yeah,
That those scenes are so emotional, and I with the amount of the way they prop each other up and prop each other up,
yeah.
and
It's like
Storm being
limited because they've both been off doing other stuff throughout the season. But when they are together, you see there's a really good chemistry there.
yeah, and you got Storm being like or we had first it was Jean saying make them mind your weather, and then Storm saying make them weather your mind. I mean, it's again very touching. I get chills. I mean, again, this whole episode, this whole season could just be me with the Rock meme, just pointing up my arm, just being like, that's. I mean, just great moments. And they go into battle, and again, that was a battle. The battle on Astro M was crazy, but between Jean fighting Sinister, you had the team trying to go after Bastion. Of course, he's got mountain of Sentinels. They kind of explained away a little bit like why the Sentinels were working where he was. Didn't love that explanation, but okay, we'll let that go. Um, but it ends up ending with Sinister really obviously putting his thumb on the scale in a way that I don't think I actually expected him to, and we end up getting a fight scene between Cable and Jean because of it. He is able to control Cable just like he was able to control Madeline Pryor, and Cable, has again one of the greatest lines where he's like you don't like I'm the son of one of the greatest telepaths in the world. You don't think that I can't hold my own weight? And he goes, or telekinesis people in the world, and he goes into telekinesis telepathy battle with Jean. It's so many times we are so used to Cable being the guy with the big guns and stuff. I actually love that you had that showdown between Jean and Cable, and it don't go well for Jean. It's so bad to the point where Jean feels like she has to tell Scott all the way across literally across the sky, the universe, whatever, to be like, "Hey, I love you," and then that's all Scott sees, and it's hard to tell if Jean is wiped off, if she's killed in this scene. I know there's some that are saying that she was. Do you think Jean was killed in that scene? I don't know. I'm not convinced of that, but how did you read that?
Um, you know how these shows go. I mean, I think they want us to think that she's dead.
Right.
That her giving out the signal to Scott was the insinuation that that's what happened. Given how dark this show has been, and we'll talk about that, later. But given how dark this show has been, like it does like make you think if she was dead, like I'm not saying they would show, like I'm not. There are ways you can show these things, but like you feel like we would have seen a body. It would have been a
Mm-hmm.
confirmed like we got with Gambit, especially with a character as big as Jean Grey. I don't know if you play around with the way you do that when it comes to that. So makes you. Yeah, I think your instincts are probably correct that there's maybe some hijinks going on there.
Yeah, yeah.
But the show definitely wants us to think that. As far as a prediction, I would. My gut tells me probably there's something that happened there because again, I'm just playing the numbers. The X Men show. I don't think they're gonna take off half the team.
Well,
It's
yeah,
my guess.
especially how this episode ends. Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. The way the episode ends, I thought that as well. But it was interesting to see how they put that. They definitely gave you that like feeling with it, and again the artwork in that telepathy battle between Cable and Jean was just it was like picturesque, beautiful, just beautiful stuff. Storm going after all those Sentinels in the sky again, awesome stuff. It was great. Uh, you know, Bastion and Sinister certainly are a force to be reckoned with here. Like, good effort by Morph to try to trick Bastion, and Bastion cleverly being like, Sinister is a coward. He would never give up his own life for the sake of someone else, and they immediately know that that's not him. But so the X Men that are going after Bastion aren't in good shape. It don't look like Jean's in good shape. So the battle on with Bastion is not going that well. Then you have the battle on Asteroid M, which is again a slug it out affair. Scott, being the infield general that he is, gets that information from Jean. That's obviously very emotional for him, but he's able to in the moment be like, okay, that was really terrible what happened, but like in order to save the world, like we can't like ice Magneto right now. So he actually shoots Xavier, and it's like you can't like they're not ready down there because Xavier earlier in the scene's like we have to just trust that they're gonna get the job done. But when he saw what they were in, he was like, we can't
Who did he
stop
get
Magneto
to
now.
take off the helmet? It was a Wolverine or somebody else. He got the
I
thing
think
off
I
of
think
Magneto.
Wolverine eventually gets. I think he's the guy that gets the helmet knocked off, just through the
Right.
wrestling that they were going through, and so Xavier was about to like go ham, and Wesley's like, you can't, and he was going ham. Like if Xavier was about to do something very bad to Magneto, but it was Scott who stopped it, and of course that gave Magneto an upper hand, and then he again. This is Game 7. I mean, he is crushing Xavier's skull with his own helmet. Just awesome visual, just awesome writing, just like the way that
Yeah,
storyboarding
at that
these
point,
fight scenes are just insane. Like,
you mentioned Game 7. Like that was, we got to a point where these two guys who have done this for through decades or however long in this show, like they've done the song and dance for a long time. Great friends, but at the end of the day, you're never gonna budge. I'm never gonna budge. And like you said, it was holy war at that point. And well, I mean, we saw, like you said, kind of end game moment of trying to take out Magneto, and Magneto then bonds with his his final act being like, "Look, you're never gonna get it, Charles. This is it. Go back
yeah,
to the Shi'ar or whatever. Go back to where you came from. We thought you were dead anyway." And when we get in my opinion, EJ, this is a
yeah.
hot take. Maybe it's not, but as great as the show's been, I think the biggest OMG moment is the end of this episode.
Ever from this series, you say, or are you saying from this season?
Yeah, from this season. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
think we
I,
get the
I,
biggest OMG moment.
yeah. I mean, man, the
Yeah,
Genosha scene itself is kind of insane, but you can make the case that this was it. So we get the moment,
yeah,
Wolverine um, gets what he thinks is the killing blow on Xavier, which again we have not seen this yet. I think ever on X Men Anime Series was Wolverine cutting flesh. We had kind of have some kind of semblance of that with what happened with that he's beating up. He's slicing up those Prime Sentinels that were humans. So that was like kind of our dipping our toe in it. But this is like blood. This is like obviously like he is put his claws through Magneto's chest. I just never. Figured we get that in this season. I figured we get to that point because this is a more mature show. but to still see it is still pretty surreal. Given I was always the guy that always would complain like, "Oh man, Wolverine would like slash up all of these robots in the original show," and then when like a person would be there, then he retract his claws and punch them. Like it was always like it's a kids show. They're not gonna show that kind of violence. But this was this was no. They went full tilt with this, and you think, oh, okay, maybe this is the end. It is not the end. Magneto deciding that no, I'm not gonna take this lying down, and you have one of the most iconic moments in the history of the X-Men comics and in Wolverine's history plays out where you have Magneto strip Wolverine of his adamantium in the cartoon show, um, which ends up being a massive storyline within the series. Of course, Wolverine ends up leaving the team eventually in the comics. He's badly injured, obviously, and he's on the shelf for a while. So ends up being this is a really big foreshadowing to where Wolverine's character is going to go beyond this season. What did you think of how they ended this episode with that iconic moment?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean this is like you mentioned, a moment just nuts, just nuts for anybody that's been watching. That's anybody that was watching that play out. Um, you didn't think it'd go from like I got like 95, but like when it's at 95, you don't expect it to go any higher at that point. You're like,
Yeah,
this thing's already like been ratcheting intensity. It went from like 95 with that moment, but because look, I mean, Magneto died moment. I think we all would have been like, damn, that's wild, but I guess it had to happen.
yeah,
Yeah, like what? Magneto being like, oh, it's like I'm not dead, and you got to do that. You're gonna be the guy,
yeah,
and then decides like, all right, gloves are off. I've been letting you live. I've been letting you for too long with all that. And again, we saw it
yeah,
played out, and that was clear a creative team that realized that we're not beholden to the same, you know, Y7 rating that the
yep,
original animated series was, or any other X-Men animated series for that matter, has been into. So I think we saw that play out, and led to a crazy moment. Like you said, is he dead? Again, odds are they already killed off
no
Gambit.
chance.
Probably not. But I think that this does play into coming into the picture at some point, and maybe Wolverine. Maybe that's a method in which Wolverine gets his, for lack of a better term.
So in the comics, Apocalypse is the one who restores Wolverine's adamantium. Wolverine becomes one of the four horsemen. I think we'll probably get to that at some point, but I think it'll take us probably a little while to get there. I see, Kendall, your feed's going in and out a little bit, so I know we'll probably try to wrap this up in a little bit. But it was a show stopping moment. One of the greatest moments in the series ever, including the original show. I agree. You could definitely make the case the biggest moment in this season right here. So it's just an awesome moment. Really kind of ratcheting up just the stakes and what that means for Magneto and Xavier's relationship. I think that Onslaught may not be here, but I think us walking down that line towards Onslaught, this is just another key to us maybe getting there at some point. Because Xavier was already on 10 in this fight, so this is gonna put him on 30, 45. Like he's gonna be this leads him to incapacitate Magneto in a way that he's never done before in the comics. I expect him to make that same move on this show, which is going to be killer. Just an absolute killer moment for a killer episode. So, this is New Generation Podcast Network, New Generation Media. We're doing our X-Men 97 review here, X-Men episode 9. Tolerance is Extinction. Let's give a score here before we get out of here. So I'll let you go first, Kendall, real quickly. What do you got the score out of 10 for Tolerance is Extinction?
Uh, I'll go 8.5. Episode, I would like as much as this episode only is. It probably didn't feel like it's good, like it's not as good as for example. But I think the ending the last like 5 minutes, and just put the score. I had to give it a higher score. It's a little bit. I was lower. This was an episode where it dragged out a little bit in terms of
Yeah.
intended. Probably. Well, someone suggests like 9 to 10 probably could have just been a 1 hour episode, so that's probably. But the only thing saving that from like being more upset about that ending.
Yeah, I'm not sure for those checking us out. I'm not sure, Kendall. I know your streams kind of been very wonky for the last few minutes. So I heard 8.5 was the score you gave there. Apologies for the technical difficulty we're going through here towards the final during the final stretch of this episode. For me, I'm gonna give this episode. I'm gonna give this a 9. This was spectacular. This had so many awesome moments. The fight scenes were awesome. Dialogue was awesome. I mean, Charles Xavier trying to give Magneto one of his old little monologues during that Game 7 fight. Magneto being like, "I'm gonna say something I've been wanting to say to you for a long time. Shut up." Iconic. Like, this is iconic stuff we were seeing in this episode. And look, the only episode I gave a 10, I think, in the season was the Genosha episode. This is probably, it's a hair below that, so I didn't want to give it a 10 again, but this was elite stuff. This was elite storytelling. This was elite fight scenes. This is how you definitely culminate towards the end. I told you guys a little nitpicks I had, but they're nitpicks. This was riveting television, and I can't wait to watch this episode. I can't wait to watch. I'm very curious at some point to sit down and watch all 3 as a mini movie. Like, I want to know how that feels to watch episode part 1, part 2, part 3, and maybe next week. Maybe I'm not on the first watch, but eventually, maybe next week I'm gonna try to do that. I think, watch them all and see how that feels. Because I watched last week's episode probably like 4 or 5 times. This show, I can't remember the last cartoon I've watched where, and I know some, there's some because like I do preparation for this show, obviously, but I can't remember the last of the anime show for sure, and not really any show that I routinely watch over and over again. Like, I watch these episodes during the week. I watch them sporadically throughout the rest of the week, all the time. Just the little tidbits that hit you harder. You pick up on little things, or things that you picked up the first time, but you pick up more when you watch it again. It's that kind of episode. So this is not gonna be any different. I'll probably watch this 3 or 4 more times before we get to next week. This was absolutely stellar, man, and I can't wait for the finale. I know we got to run here, so I'm gonna sign off for us here. We got a lot to talk about next week, so I'm really excited to have our finale. I want to thank Kendall for joining me on this ride. Shamari's been on this ride as well. Thank you to the viewers who've been checking us out every week. One more episode on this live stream series we're doing on X-Men 97. This was Tolerance is Extinction Part 2. So make sure if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you follow me on Twitter/X, EJ_Stu. You can find Kendall on Twitter, NewGenKen. And make sure you follow our overall social media. We're on Twitter, New Generation Pod, Instagram, New Generation Podcast. And if you enjoy this content, make sure you follow our podcast. Where the New Generation Podcast Network is where you'll find us when you search on your streaming platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. So all that stuff, make sure you hit follow and subscribe. And make sure you're here next week for the finale of this series, the finale, of course, of the season when we recap Tolerance is Extinction Part 3. I'll be here. Excuse me. Kendall will be here, and Shamari will be back next week. So that's going to be.
You have any last bold predictions?
Last bold predictions. Neither Xavier or Magneto are leading the X-Men. Like, I think Cyclops is the leader of the team moving forward. I don't know how bold that is. That's the first immediate one. I think that I think this team is going to be. I mean, they've teased a lot, and the team is clearly going to be extremely different next year. Like, Rogue's not gonna be on the team. Wolverine ain't gonna be on the team. Gambit's already passed. Like, I think we're looking at a. I think we're looking at a brand new team next year. Like, I think Cyclops will be back. I don't know if Jean's around, given what's happened in this episode. I wonder if Emma Frost. This is how they get her into the fold. Um,
100%.
with, yeah, I mean, I watched that scene today, and I'm like, this is where Emma comes in. You would think Emma Frost could be in the fold.
Another character, another character that you mentioned that we've talked about a little bit, like his name dropped. So we're like, where is he? Bishop.
The Bishop thing we gotta figure out something. Yeah, I kept watching that episode from last week, and they keep, Genie being like, "Yeah, Cable said he got lost in time stream." That don't smell right. That don't pass no.
They when the Rogue that brought up Bishop, being like, Bishop's not there. We don't know what happened to him.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't be surprised if we get the answer to what happened to Bishop next week. But I also, my bold prediction is I think that they tease that Gambit will be back.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, you got Wolverine losing adamantium, and you got Gambit being dead. Now, both Gambit and Wolverine have been deafed in terms of the Four Horsemen, so you can't have two, but they could tweak that, make one of them deaf, make one of them other ones. But two of the more famous X-Men that have been Apocalypse acolytes and Apocalypse Four Horsemen have gone the path that they would need to go to probably get them there. So definitely Wolverine, and probably Gambit. So an Apocalypse setup at some point where the X-Men are fighting Wolverine and Gambit potentially. Like, I could totally see that as a possibility. So yeah, no, I think that both of those could be on the table for sure. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Again, catch us next week. We'll be doing our recap of episode 10, Tyrants of the Extinction Part 3. That'll be the finale of the season and the finale of this series we're doing. So again, make sure you check us next week. Twitter, EJ_Stewards will be live, and of course we'll be live on YouTube, New Generation Media. Thank you guys again. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.